Lieutenant Sarah Chen had always been different from other pilots. While her fellow aviators talked about weekend parties and expensive cars, she spent her free time studying flight patterns of real falcons at the nearby wildlife sanctuary. Her obsession with these birds of prey wasn't just a hobby. It was research that would later save her life and earn her a legendary nickname among the most elite warriors in the world. The morning sun cast long shadows across Naval Air Station Oceana as Sarah performed her pre-flight inspection on the Fa-18 Super Hornet. Her hands moved with practiced precision, checking every bolt, wire, and surface. At 28, she had already logged more combat hours than pilots twice her age, but she never took shortcuts. Her father, a Vietnam veteran, had taught her that attention to detail was the difference between coming home and becoming a statistic. "Chen, you ready for today's exercise?" called out Commander James Morrison, her squadron leader. Morrison was old-school Navy, a man who believed that women belonged on ships, not in fighter jets. He had made his feelings clear from day one, though he couldn't argue with Sarah's performance records. "Always ready, sir," Sarah replied, not looking up from her inspection. She had learned early in her career that the best response to doubt was excellence. Every mission, every training exercise, every simulation, she approached them all with the same deadly seriousness. Today's exercise was different. Instead of the usual air-to-air combat training, they were working with a special operations team on close air support. The SEALs on the ground would call in strikes on designated targets, while Sarah and her wingman provided precision fire from above. It sounded routine, but Sarah had learned that nothing involving special operations was ever truly routine. As she climbed into her cockpit, Sarah caught sight of the maintenance crew chief, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, giving her a thumbs up. Rodriguez had been working on aircraft longer than Sarah had been alive, and his approval meant something. He had painted a small Falcon silhouette on the side of her plane after she had pulled off an impossible rescue mission 6 months earlier. The other pilots had started calling her Falcon after that, though most of them didn't understand why the name fit so perfectly. The mission briefing had been straightforward. A team of Navy SEALs would be conducting a simulated raid on a compound in the Nevada desert. Sarah and her wingman, Lieutenant Jake Spider Webb, would provide overwatch and respond to any calls for close air support. The exercise was designed to test coordination between air and ground units in preparation for an upcoming deployment. What the briefing hadn't mentioned was that this particular SEAL team had a reputation for testing. Their air support to the breaking point, led by Lieutenant Commander Marcus Reaper Valdez, Team 7 was known for pushing every boundary and questioning every assumption. They had worked with dozens of pilots over the years, and very few had earned their respect. As Sarah's Super Hornet lifted off the runway, she felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with every flight. The Nevada desert stretched out below her like a brown canvas marked with geometric patterns of roads and buildings. Somewhere down there, 8 of the Navy's most elite warriors were beginning their approach to the target compound. "Falcon, this is Reaper Actual," came the voice over her radio. The SEAL team leader's voice was calm and professional, but Sarah could hear something else underneath. Skepticism. "We're beginning our approach to the target. Maintain overwatch at Angels 15. Copy that, Reaper. Falcon is on station at 15,000 feet. I have eyes on your position," Sarah responded, adjusting her flight path to provide the best view of the compound below. Through her targeting pod, Sarah could see the SEAL team moving across the desert floor like shadows. They moved with a fluid precision that reminded her of a wolf pack, every member knowing exactly where the others were at all times. The compound they were approaching was a realistic mock-up of the kind of terrorist hideout they might encounter overseas, complete with multiple buildings, guard towers, and simulated enemy positions. "Falcon, we're taking effective fire from the northeast guard tower. Can you service that target?" came Reaper's voice, tension creeping in as the simulation intensified. Sarah's targeting computer immediately locked onto the tower. Her finger hovered over the trigger, but something made her pause. She had been studying the compound layout, and something didn't look right. The angles were wrong for the kind of fire the SEALs were reporting. "Reaper, negative on that target. The northeast tower doesn't have line of sight to your position. Check your 6. You've got a shooter in the building behind you, 2nd floor, northwest window." There was a moment of silence on the radio. Sarah held her breath, knowing that she had just contradicted one of the most experienced special operations leaders in the Navy. Either she was right, or she had just made a career-ending mistake. "Falcon, how the hell did you see that?" came Reaper's voice, genuine surprise replacing the skepticism. "You're right. We've got him. Nice catch." The exercise continued for another 2 hours, with Sarah providing not just fire support but tactical intelligence that the SEALs hadn't expected. She spotted hidden enemy positions, identified escape routes, and even detected a simulated IED that the ground team had missed. By the time the exercise was over, she had prevented 3 simulated casualties and helped the team complete their mission ahead of schedule. As Sarah taxied her aircraft back to the hangar, she could see a group of men in desert camouflage waiting on the tarmac. The SEALs had requested a face-to-face debrief, which was unusual for a routine training exercise. As she climbed down from her cockpit, she found herself face-to-face with Lieutenant Commander Valdez. Reaper was exactly what Sarah had expected: tall, lean, with eyes that seemed to see everything. His uniform bore the scars of multiple deployments, and his bearing spoke of a man who had seen combat and emerged stronger for it. The 7 other members of his team stood behind him, their faces unreadable. "Lieutenant Chen," Reaper said, extending his hand. "That was some impressive flying up there. My team doesn't impress easily, but you've got our attention." Sarah shook his hand, maintaining eye contact. "Just doing my job, sir." "No," said one of the other SEALs, a massive man with a thick Brooklyn accent. "That wasn't just doing your job. That was thinking like one of us. How did you know to check that building?" Sarah smiled, thinking of the hours she had spent watching Falcon's hunt. "Falcons don't just look at their prey," she explained. "They study the entire environment. They know that the real threat often comes from where you least expect it." The SEALs exchanged glances, and Sarah saw something change in their expressions. The skepticism was gone, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like respect. 3 weeks after the training exercise, Sarah found herself sitting in a classified briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command. The walls were lined with photos of fallen heroes and unit citations that told stories of courage in the darkest corners of the world. She had been summoned here by Admiral Patricia Hayes, the commander of Naval Special Warfare, for reasons that nobody had bothered to explain. Admiral Hayes was a legend in her own right, the first woman to command Special Operations Forces and a veteran of conflicts that most people had never heard of. When she entered the briefing room, followed by Lieutenant Commander Valdez and his team, Sarah understood that this was no ordinary meeting. "Lieutenant Chen," Admiral Hayes began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned her position through decades of exceptional service. "Team 7 has made an unusual request. They want you assigned as their dedicated air support for their next deployment." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Being requested by a SEAL team was an honor that few pilots ever received. It meant that these warriors, who trusted their lives to very few people, were willing to put their faith in her abilities. "With respect, Admiral," Sarah replied, "I'm honored by the request, but I'm not sure I understand why Team 7 would want a pilot they've only worked with once." Reaper leaned forward in his chair. "Because in that one exercise you proved something that we rarely see in aviators. You think like an operator, not just a pilot. You see the battlefield the way we do." The briefing that followed painted a picture of a mission unlike anything Sarah had ever been asked to support. Team 7 would be deploying to a remote region where terrorist forces had established a network of caves and bunkers in mountainous terrain. The mission would require precision strikes in areas where the margin for error was measured in feet, not miles. "The target area is what we call a bowl," explained Chief Petty Officer Mike "Tank" Rodriguez, the team's explosives expert. "It's surrounded by high ridges on 3 sides with only one way in or out. The enemy has been using it as a training camp and weapons cache for over a year." Sarah studied the topographical maps spread across the briefing table. The terrain was challenging. Steep mountains, narrow valleys, and unpredictable wind patterns that would make precision flying difficult. But what concerned her most were the civilian settlements scattered throughout the region. "What about collateral damage protocols?" Sarah asked, pointing to several villages marked on the map. "That's exactly why we need you," said Petty Officer First Class Danny Ghost Martinez, the team's sniper. "Most pilots see targets and threats. You see the whole picture. In this area of operations, that could mean the difference between mission success and an international incident." Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah underwent intensive training with Team 7. She learned their communication protocols, studied their tactics, and most importantly, began to understand how they thought. The SEALs operated on a level of tactical sophistication that went far beyond what she had experienced in conventional military operations. The team's medic, Petty Officer Second Class Lisa Doc Thompson, was particularly helpful in explaining the psychological aspects of special operations. When we're on the ground, Doc explained during one training session, we're not just fighting the enemy. We're fighting fear, exhaustion, and the constant pressure of making life or death decisions with incomplete information. We need to know that our air support understands that pressure. Sarah spent hours in flight simulators, practicing the kind of precision strikes that Team 7 would require. She worked with targets no larger than a car, in terrain that offered no room for error. The training was exhausting, but it was also exhilarating. For the first time in her career, Sarah felt like she was part of something bigger than herself. The breakthrough moment came during a night training exercise in the California mountains. Team 7 was conducting a simulated raid on a cave complex, and Sarah was providing overwatch from her Super Hornet. The target area was shrouded in darkness, with only the green glow of her night vision systems illuminating the terrain below. Falcon, we need immediate fire support on the cave entrance, came Reaper's voice over the radio. Enemy forces are falling back to prepared positions. Sarah locked onto the target with her targeting pod, but something made her hesitate. The infrared signature didn't look right. The heat patterns were wrong for a group of armed fighters. Reaper, hold fire. I'm seeing civilian heat signatures mixed with combatants. Can you confirm target identification? There was a tense pause on the radio. In a real combat situation, hesitation could cost lives, but so could firing on innocent people. Falcon, you're right again, came Ghost's voice. We've got women and children being used as human shields. How did you see that from up there? Sarah smiled grimly as she adjusted her flight pattern for a better angle. Falcons hunt at night too, she replied. And they know the difference between prey and everything else. The exercise ended with Team 7 successfully completing their mission without a single simulated civilian casualty. As they debriefed afterward, Sarah realized that something fundamental had changed in how the SEALs viewed her. You know, said Tank, cleaning his weapon in the dim light of their temporary base camp. Most pilots think their job is to drop bombs where we tell them to. You actually understand that sometimes the most important thing you can do is not drop the bomb. Reaper nodded in agreement. That's the difference between support and partnership. You're not just our air support, you're part of the team. The final week of training focused on emergency procedures and contingency planning. Sarah learned the team's extraction protocols, their emergency communication procedures, and most importantly, their philosophy of never leaving anyone behind. In special operations, explained Petty Officer First Class James Shepard Williams, the team's communications specialist, we have a saying, the only easy day was yesterday. Every mission is hard, every decision matters, and every team member, including you, is essential to success. Sarah found herself thinking about her father's stories from Vietnam, about the bonds forged between warriors who depended on each other for survival. She was beginning to understand that being accepted by Team 7 wasn't just about her flying skills. It was about earning a place in a brotherhood that extended back generations. The night before deployment, Sarah sat alone in her quarters writing a letter to her parents. She couldn't tell them where she was going or what she would be doing, but she wanted them to know that she was finally doing exactly what she was meant to do. As she sealed the letter, Sarah caught sight of her reflection in the window. The woman looking back at her was no longer the uncertain pilot who had started this journey. She was someone who had earned her place among the elite, someone who had proven that the nickname Falcon wasn't just about her flying ability, it was about her way of seeing the world. The forward operating base in Afghanistan was a study in controlled chaos. Helicopters thundered overhead carrying supplies and personnel, while ground crews worked around the clock to maintain the aircraft that kept coalition forces supplied and protected. Sarah had been on the ground for 2 days, adjusting to the altitude and the constant background noise of a base at war. Her Super Hornet sat in a reinforced hangar, ready for immediate launch. Unlike the pristine facilities back in the States, everything here was functional and temporary. Sandbags and concrete barriers protected the aircraft from incoming mortar rounds, while armed guards patrolled the perimeter around the clock. Team 7 had arrived the day before, emerging from a transport helicopter like ghosts materializing from shadow. Sarah watched them unload their gear with practiced efficiency, every movement economical, every piece of equipment exactly where it needed to be. These men had done this before many times, and it showed in their calm professionalism. "Welcome to the edge of the world," Reaper said as he approached Sarah's position near the flight line. The mountain peaks surrounding the base rose like ancient sentinels, their snow-capped summits disappearing into low-hanging clouds. "Intelligence says our target is about 60 miles northeast of here, in a valley that hasn't seen coalition forces in over 6 months. The mission briefing that evening painted a picture of a complex operation. The terrorist cell they were hunting had been responsible for a series of attacks on coalition convoys, using weapons and explosives cached in the mountain stronghold. Recent intelligence suggested that a high-value target, a bomb maker known for his sophisticated IED designs, was currently at the compound. The target window is narrow," explained Major David Harrison, the base intelligence officer. "Our asset on the ground indicates that the bomb maker will only be at the location for another 48 hours. After that, he disappears back into the general population." Sarah studied the reconnaissance photos spread across the briefing table. The target compound was built into the side of a mountain, with multiple levels connected by narrow paths carved into the rock. The architecture was designed to be defensible, with clear lines of sight covering all approaches. "What's the collateral damage assessment?" Sarah asked, noting several structures that appeared to be residential buildings in the valley below the compound. "That's the challenge," admitted Major Harrison. "The target compound is directly above a village of about 200 people. Many of them are probably innocent civilians, but the terrain makes it impossible to tell who might be supporting the terrorist cell." Ghost leaned forward, pointing to a series of cave openings visible in the photographs. "These caves connect to a tunnel system that runs throughout the mountain. If we don't hit them hard and fast, they'll disappear underground and we'll never find them." The plan that emerged from the briefing was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its complexity. Team 7 would insert by helicopter into a landing zone 5 miles from the target, then approach on foot through terrain that would challenge even their exceptional skills. Sarah would provide overwatch and close air support, but the narrow valley and steep terrain meant that her margin for error was essentially zero. "The biggest risk," Tank explained during the team's private briefing afterward, "is that we'll be operating in what amounts to a canyon. If things go wrong, there's no easy way out and the enemy has all the high ground." Doc nodded grimly. "We've identified 3 potential landing zones for emergency extraction, but 2 of them are under direct observation from the target compound. If we need to get out fast, you're going to be our lifeline." The night before the mission, Sarah found herself unable to sleep. She walked out to the flight line where her Super Hornet waited under the stars. The air was thin and cold, carrying the scent of snow from the high peaks. In the distance, she could hear the low rumble of generators and the occasional radio chatter from the operations center. "Can't sleep either." Sarah turned to find Shepard approaching, his communications gear slung over his shoulder. The young SEAL looked older than his 26 years, carrying the weight of multiple deployments in his weathered face. "Just thinking," Sarah replied. "Tomorrow's going to be challenging." Shepard nodded, setting his equipment down and leaning against the aircraft's landing gear. "You know, most of us were skeptical when they told us we'd be working with a new pilot. We've been burned before by aviators who thought they understood ground operations but really didn't have a clue." "And now?" Sarah asked. "Now we trust you," Shepard said simply. "That's not something we give lightly. But you've proven that you see things the way we do. Tomorrow, that's going to matter more than you know." As dawn broke over the mountains, the base came alive with pre-mission activity. Sarah completed her pre-flight inspection while Team 7 conducted their final equipment checks. Every weapon was cleaned and tested, every piece of gear was accounted for, and every contingency was rehearsed one final time. The mission launch was scheduled for 800 hours, time to put the team on target during the morning hours when visibility was best. But the sun hadn't yet heated the mountain air enough to create dangerous turbulence. Sarah's Super Hornet would launch 30 minutes ahead of the insertion helicopter, providing overwatch for the flight route and establishing communications with forward controllers. "Falcon, this is Reaper," came the voice over her radio as Sarah's aircraft climbed toward its patrol altitude. "We're 20 minutes out from insertion. Weather looks good, but we're picking up radio chatter that suggests increased enemy activity in the target area. Sarah adjusted her flight path to provide the best view of the insertion zone. Through her targeting pod, she could see the helicopter carrying Team 7 as it flew nap of the Earth through the mountain valleys, using the terrain to mask its approach. Reaper, I have eyes on your bird. The LZ looks clear, but I'm seeing movement in the village below the target compound. It could be normal morning activity or it could be a reception committee. Copy that, Falcon. We'll be on the ground in 10 minutes. Maintain overwatch and be ready for immediate close air support if things go sideways. The helicopter insertion went flawlessly, with Team 7 disappearing into the rocky terrain within seconds of touchdown. Sarah watched through her sensors as the 8 men moved like shadows across the mountainside, using every piece of cover and concealment to mask their approach to the target. For the next 3 hours, Sarah circled overhead while Team 7 made their way through terrain that would have challenged experienced mountaineers. The narrow paths and steep rock faces forced them to move slowly, but their progress was steady and professional. Falcon, we're in position for final approach, came Reaper's voice over the radio. Target compound is active. We count at least 12 individuals and we've confirmed the presence of our primary target. Request you maintain high station and be ready for immediate fire support. Sarah checked her weapon systems one final time. Her aircraft carried a mix of precision-guided bombs and cannon rounds, each weapon carefully selected for the mission requirements. In the narrow confines of the mountain valley, every shot would have to be perfect. Reaper, Falcon is ready. I have eyes on the compound and clear identification of all structures. Standing by for your call. As she watched Team 7 begin their final approach, Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came before combat. But underneath the excitement was something else. A deep sense of responsibility for the lives of the warriors moving across the mountain below her. They were counting on her to protect them and she would not let them down. The attack began at exactly 11:47 hours with a coordinated assault that demonstrated why Team 7 was considered among the elite of Special Operations Forces. Sarah watched through her targeting pod as the SEALs moved with deadly precision, each man knowing exactly where his teammates were and what his role was in the unfolding operation. Falcon, we have multiple armed targets engaging from the main compound, came Reaper's voice, calm despite the sound of gunfire crackling through the radio. Need immediate fire support on the northeast building, second level. Danger close. We're less than 50 meters from the target. Sarah's targeting computer locked onto the specified building, but her trained eye caught something that made her pause. The heat signatures in the building were wrong. Too small, too clustered in what looked like a defensive position rather than an aggressive one. Reaper, negative on that target. I'm seeing what looks like civilians in that building, heat signatures consistent with women and children. The actual fire is coming from the cave opening 30 meters to your east. Falcon, how can you be sure? Came Ghost's voice over the radio. We're taking effective fire from that direction. Sarah had spent countless hours studying thermal imaging patterns, learning to distinguish between combatants and non-combatants based on their movement, positioning, and heat signatures. What she was seeing in the northeast building looked like a family huddled together in fear. Not fighters engaging in combat. Ghost, the firing positions don't match the thermal signatures. Your shooters are in the cave system using firing ports cut into the rock. The building signatures are stationary and grouped. Classic civilian pattern when under fire. There was a brief pause in the radio chatter, then Reaper's voice came back with grudging respect. Falcon, you're right again. We've got eyes on muzzle flashes from the cave positions. Can you service those targets? Sarah adjusted her targeting pod to focus on the cave openings carved into the mountainside. These were military positions, designed to provide concealment and protection, while allowing clear fields of fire down into the valley. The thermal signatures here were different, individual heat sources moving between positions, the bright flashes of weapon fire, the unmistakable pattern of combatants engaged in organized resistance. Reaper, I have positive identification on 3 cave positions with active shooters. Requesting clearance to engage with precision munitions. Cleared hot, Falcon. Make it count. Sarah's first bomb struck the main cave entrance with surgical precision, sealing it with tons of collapsed rock and eliminating the primary threat to Team 7. Her second strike took out a secondary position that had been providing flanking fire, while her third bomb collapsed a tunnel system that intelligence had identified as a critical supply route. "Outstanding work, Falcon," came Tank's voice over the radio. "Enemy fire has ceased from the cave positions. We're moving to secure the primary target." But the mission was far from over. As Team 7 advanced on the main compound buildings, Sarah's sensors detected movement in the valley below. A convoy of vehicles was approaching fast, kicking up clouds of dust as they raced toward the target area. "Reaper, you've got company coming up the valley road. 4 vehicles heavily loaded ETA to your position approximately 15 minutes. "Copy that, Falcon. Can you identify the vehicles?" Sarah zoomed in with her targeting pod, studying the approaching convoy. The vehicles were civilian trucks, but they were riding low on their suspensions and moving with the kind of urgency that suggested military purpose rather than commercial traffic. "Reaper, I count 4 pickup trucks with what appears to be armed personnel in the beds. This looks like a quick reaction force coming to reinforce the compound." The situation was rapidly becoming more complex. Team 7 was engaged in clearing the compound buildings, searching for their high-value target while under pressure from an approaching enemy force. Sarah's role was evolving from close air support to tactical intelligence, providing the SEALs with information they couldn't obtain from their ground-level perspective. "Falcon, we need you to delay that convoy," came Reaper's voice. "We've located our primary target, but we need another 10 minutes to secure him and search the compound for intelligence materials." Sarah studied the approaching vehicles through her targeting system. The lead truck was already entering the narrow section of the valley road where a rock slide or explosion could block the entire convoy. It was a perfect interdiction point, but it required precision that left no room for error. "Reaper, I can block the road with a precision strike, but you need to be aware that this is going to announce our presence to anyone monitoring radio frequencies in the area. We'll lose the element of surprise for future operations." "Understood, Falcon. Execute the strike. We'll deal with the consequences later." Sarah's bomb struck the road just ahead of the lead vehicle, bringing down a section of the mountainside that blocked the narrow valley passage completely. The convoy came to an abrupt halt, trapped between the rock slide and the steep walls of the valley. "Nice work, Falcon," came Doc's voice. "That bought us the time we need. We've got our target secured and we're collecting intelligence materials now." But as Sarah maintained her overwatch position, her sensors detected something that made her blood run cold. Heat signatures were appearing on the ridgeline above Team 7's position, individuals moving into positions that would give them clear shots down into the compound. "Reaper, you've got movement on the high ground. Multiple personnel taking positions on the ridgeline directly above your location. This looks like an ambush setup." "How many?" came Reaper's tense voice. Sarah counted the heat signatures as they moved into position. These weren't the disorganized movements of panicked civilians or even local militia. The figures on the ridgeline were moving with the discipline and coordination of trained fighters. "I count 8 to 10 individuals in fighting positions along the ridge. Reaper, this has all the hallmarks of a planned ambush. Someone knew you were coming." The implications of Sarah's observation hit the team immediately. Their mission had been compromised, either through intercepted communications or local intelligence networks. Team 7 was walking into a trap that had been carefully prepared by an enemy who knew their capabilities and tactics. "Falcon, can you service those positions without risking collateral damage to the village?" asked Reaper. Sarah studied the terrain carefully. The ridgeline positions were directly above the village, and any missed shots or secondary explosions could endanger innocent civilians. But if she didn't act, Team 7 would be caught in a deadly crossfire with no avenue of escape. "Reaper, the positions are too close to civilian structures for standard munitions, but I can use my cannon to suppress the positions while you extract. It won't eliminate the threat, but it should keep their heads down long enough for you to get clear." "Do it, Falcon. We're starting our withdrawal now." Sarah rolled her aircraft into a strafing run, her 20mm cannon stitching a line of fire across the ridgeline positions. The high explosive rounds sparked and flashed against the rocky terrain, forcing the ambush team to take cover. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it provided the suppression that Team 7 needed to begin their fighting withdrawal from the compound. As the SEALs moved back toward their extraction point, Sarah realized that the mission had become something much more complex than a simple raid. They weren't just fighting a terrorist cell. They were engaged with a sophisticated enemy that had anticipated their tactics and prepared accordingly. The real test of Team 7's capabilities and Sarah's partnership with them was just beginning. The withdrawal from the compound turned into a running battle that tested every aspect of Team 7's training and Sarah's ability to provide effective air support in impossible conditions. The enemy had clearly planned for this moment, positioning fighters along multiple escape routes and using the mountainous terrain to their advantage. "Falcon, we're taking fire from multiple positions," came Ghost's voice over the radio, tension evident despite his professional calm. "They've got us in a crossfire between the ridgeline and positions lower on the mountain. We need immediate suppression on grid coordinates I'm about to send." Sarah received the coordinates and immediately identified the problem. The enemy positions were scattered across a wide area of rocky terrain, making it impossible to eliminate them with a few well-placed bombs. Worse, the SEALs were caught in the middle of this killing zone with limited cover and no easy avenue of retreat. "Reaper, I can see your problem," Sarah transmitted as she analyzed the tactical situation from her aerial perspective. "You've got at least 15 enemy positions in a semicircle around your location. They're using natural rock formations for cover, and they've got interlocking fields of fire covering all your possible routes." "Options, Falcon?" came Reaper's reply, the sound of gunfire crackling through his transmission. Sarah studied the terrain with the intensity of a falcon examining a hunting ground. There had to be a solution, some weakness in the enemy's position that she could exploit. Then she saw it, a narrow ravine that cut through the mountainside, invisible from the ground but clearly visible from her altitude. "Reaper, there's a ravine running northeast from your position, about 50 meters to your left. It's narrow, but it provides concealment from the high ground positions and leads toward your primary extraction point." "Negative, Falcon," came Tank's voice. "We scouted that ravine on our approach. It's a dead end, terminates in a rock wall about 200 meters up." Sarah zoomed in with her targeting pod, studying the ravine more carefully. Tank was right about the rock wall, but there was something else, a shadow that didn't quite match the surrounding terrain. "Tank, that's not a solid wall. I'm seeing thermal signatures that suggest an opening, possibly a cave or tunnel entrance. It might connect to the system you were targeting earlier." There was a brief pause in the radio chatter as Team 7 processed this information. Using an unknown cave system as an escape route was risky, but staying in their current position was rapidly becoming impossible. "Doc, what's your assessment of Shepard's condition?" came Reaper's voice. Sarah's heart sank as she realized that one of the team members had been wounded. Through her sensors, she could see that Team 7 had consolidated into a defensive position behind a cluster of large rocks. But they were clearly under pressure. Shepard took a round in the shoulder. Doc's voice came back. "He's mobile, but he's losing blood. We need to get him to a casualty evacuation point within the next hour." The situation was rapidly spiraling beyond the parameters of their original mission. What had started as a precision raid was becoming a desperate fight for survival, with an injured team member and an enemy force that seemed to know their every move. "Reaper, I've got an idea," Sarah transmitted, "but it's going to require perfect timing and absolute trust in my assessment of the situation." "Talk to me." "Falcon," Sarah outlined her plan quickly. She would use her remaining precision munitions to create a diversion on the far side of the enemy positions, drawing their attention and fire away from Team 7's location. While the enemy was focused on the explosions, the SEALs would make a rapid movement to the ravine entrance. Sarah would then use her cannon to suppress any enemy attempts to follow them into the ravine system. "That's a hell of a risk, Falcon," came Reaper's assessment. "If that ravine doesn't connect to an exit point, we'll be trapped underground with an injured team member." "Reaper, I've been studying the thermal patterns in that mountain for the past 4 hours. The cave system has airflow, which means it connects to the outside. The thermal signatures suggest multiple chambers and passages. It's not ideal, but it's better than staying in your current position." The decision came down to trust, the same trust that had been building between Sarah and Team 7 throughout their training and deployment. These warriors were willing to bet their lives on her ability to read the battlefield from above and provide them with intelligence they couldn't obtain from the ground. "All right, Falcon. We're going with your plan. Give us 60 seconds to prep for movement, then execute your diversion." Sarah armed her remaining precision munitions and selected targets on the far side of the enemy semicircle, The bombs would need to be spectacular enough to draw attention, but placed carefully to avoid civilian casualties in the village below. Reaper, 30 seconds to diversion. Be ready to move fast. You'll have maybe 90 seconds before they realize what's happening. Sarah's bomb struck the mountainside with devastating effect, sending cascades of rock and fire across the enemy positions. The explosions echoed through the valley like thunder, and she could see through her sensors as enemy fighters turned their attention toward the new threats. "Move, move, move," came Reaper's voice over the radio. Through her targeting pod, Sarah watched as Team 7 executed a perfect tactical movement under fire. Despite their desperate situation and Shepard's injury, they moved with the fluid precision that marked them as elite warriors. Ghost and Tank provided covering fire while Doc helped Shepard toward the ravine. Reaper coordinated the movement while the remaining team members bounded from cover to cover. "Falcon, we're at the ravine entrance," came Reaper's voice. "You were right. There's definitely an opening here. We're going in, but we'll be out of radio contact once we're underground." "Understood, Reaper. I'll maintain overwatch and be ready to provide support when you emerge. Stay safe down there." As Team 7 disappeared into the mountain, Sarah found herself alone over a battlefield that had suddenly become eerily quiet. The enemy fighters were regrouping, probably trying to determine where their targets had gone. Some were moving toward the ravine entrance, but Sarah's cannon fire kept them at a distance. For the next 45 minutes, Sarah circled over the mountain, monitoring enemy movements and searching for any sign of Team 7's emergence from the cave system. Her fuel was running low and she would soon need to return to base for refueling, but she refused to abandon her position until she knew the SEALs were safe. Then, on a ridge nearly a kilometer from where they had entered the mountain, Sarah's sensors detected movement that made her heart race with relief. 8 figures were emerging from what appeared to be a natural cave opening, moving in the tactical formation that she had learned to recognize as Team 7's signature. "Falcon, this is Reaper," came the voice over her radio, weak but clear. "We're out of the mountain and moving toward secondary extraction point. Shepard is stable, and we've got our primary target and intelligence materials secure." Sarah felt a surge of pride and relief that was unlike anything she had experienced in her military career. She had helped guide Team 7 through what should have been an impossible situation, using her unique perspective and training to see solutions that weren't visible from the ground. "Reaper, I have eyes on your position. Extraction helicopter is inbound. ETA 15 minutes. You've got clear terrain between your position and the landing zone." As she watched the SEALs make their way toward safety, Sarah realized that something fundamental had changed in her relationship with these warriors. She was no longer just their air support. She had become an integral part of their team, someone they trusted with their lives in the most desperate circumstances. 6 months later, Sarah stood before a classified review board at the Pentagon, facing questions about the mission that had made her a legend among special operations forces. The board members, senior officers from across the military, were trying to understand how a single pilot had managed to guide an elite SEAL team through what should have been an impossible situation. "Lieutenant Chen," said Admiral Hayes, who was chairing the review board, "your actions during the Afghanistan operation saved the lives of 8 Navy SEALs and resulted in the capture of a high-value target. But what we're trying to understand is how you were able to see tactical solutions that weren't apparent to experienced ground forces." Sarah had been dreading this question, knowing that her answer would sound unconventional to traditional military thinking. But the events in Afghanistan had taught her that sometimes unconventional approaches were exactly what was needed. "Admiral, I learned to see battlefields the way falcons see hunting grounds," Sarah replied. "Falcons don't just focus on their prey, they understand the entire environment. They see escape routes, hidden threats, and opportunities that aren't visible from a ground-level perspective. I applied that same approach to providing air support." General Robert Martinez, the Army's representative on the board, leaned forward with interest. "Are you saying that your wildlife observation hobby contributed to your tactical effectiveness?" "Yes, sir. Falcons are ambush predators that hunt in complex terrain. They've evolved to process multiple layers of information simultaneously: thermal patterns, wind currents, escape routes, and threat assessments. When I'm providing close air support, I use the same kind of comprehensive situational awareness." The board members exchanged glances, clearly intrigued by this unusual perspective on tactical aviation. Colonel Patricia Williams, an Air Force officer with extensive combat experience, asked the next question. Lieutenant, can you explain how you identified the civilian signatures in the building when the ground team believed they were taking fire from that position? Sarah called up the mission footage on the briefing room display, showing the thermal imagery from that critical moment. The heat signatures in the building were clustered together in what I recognized as a defensive posture, people huddling together for protection. The actual combatants showed different thermal patterns, individual heat sources moving between prepared positions. It's the difference between prey behavior and predator behavior. Admiral Hayes nodded slowly. And the cave system that Team 7 used for their escape? How did you identify that as a viable route when ground reconnaissance had dismissed it? Thermal imaging showed airflow patterns that indicated the cave system was more extensive than it appeared from the entrance. I also noticed that the local wildlife, birds and small mammals, were using areas near the cave openings, which suggested regular air circulation. Animals don't spend time in dead-end spaces. The questions continued for another hour, with the board members exploring every aspect of the mission. What emerged was a picture of tactical innovation that went beyond traditional military doctrine, combining advanced technology with observational skills learned from studying nature's most effective predators. Lieutenant Chen, Admiral Hayes said finally, this board has reviewed your performance during the Afghanistan operation, as well as your overall service record. Based on this review, you are being awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary heroism in aerial flight. Additionally, you are being selected for promotion to Lieutenant Commander and assignment as the Navy's first dedicated Special Operations Aviation Liaison. The promotion was unprecedented, a recognition that the kind of tactical thinking Sarah had demonstrated needed to be integrated into Special Operations doctrine. She would be responsible for training other pilots in the techniques she had developed and for establishing new protocols for air-ground coordination. But the real validation came 3 weeks later, when Team 7 returned from their next deployment. Sarah was waiting on the tarmac when their transport helicopter touched down, and she watched as the 8 warriors she had come to think of as family emerged from the aircraft. "Falcon," called out Tank, breaking into a grin as he spotted her. "We heard about the promotion." "Well deserved." Reaper approached with the measured stride that marked him as a professional warrior, but Sarah could see genuine warmth in his eyes. "Commander Chen," he said, emphasizing her new rank, "the team has something for you." He handed her a small wooden box, carved with intricate designs that spoke of skilled craftsmanship. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was a small silver pin depicting a falcon in flight, its wings spread wide and its talons extended. Beneath the falcon were the words Team 7 and a date, the date of their mission in Afghanistan. "This isn't an official military decoration," Ghost explained. "It's something we had made by a local craftsman. It's our way of saying that you're not just our air support, you're part of the team. Always." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes as she looked at the pin. It represented something far more valuable than any official recognition, the respect and brotherhood of warriors who had trusted her with their lives. "There's more," said Doc, pulling out a folder filled with photographs. "These are pictures from our last 3 missions. We wanted you to see what your training methods have accomplished." The photographs showed other SEAL teams working with pilots who had been trained in Sarah's techniques. The results were remarkable: more successful missions, fewer civilian casualties, and enhanced coordination between air and ground forces. "Your approach is being taught at the Naval War College now," Shepard added. "They're calling it Predator Protocol, using natural hunting behaviors as a model for tactical aviation." 6 months after that, Sarah found herself back at the wildlife sanctuary where her journey had begun, watching falcons hunt in the early morning light. But now she wasn't alone. With her was a group of young pilots, eager to learn the techniques that had made her a legend. "Watch how the falcon positions itself," Sarah instructed, pointing to a red-tailed hawk circling overhead. "It's not just looking for prey, it's reading the entire environment. Wind patterns, escape routes, potential threats. When it finally strikes, it's because it understands everything that's happening in its hunting ground." One of the young pilots, Lieutenant Amy Foster, raised her hand. "Commander, how do we apply that to close air support?" Sarah smiled, remembering when she had asked similar questions. by understanding that your job isn't just to drop bombs where the ground team tells you to. Your job is to see the battlefield in ways that they can't, and to use that perspective to keep them safe and help them succeed. As the morning sun climbed higher, Sarah watched her students practice the observational techniques that had saved Team 7's lives. Some of them would go on to work with Special Operations Forces, carrying forward the lessons learned in the mountains of Afghanistan. The nickname Falcon had stuck, but now Sarah understood that it represented something deeper than her flying abilities. It represented a way of seeing the world that combined technology with intuition, training with instinct, and individual skill with team loyalty. Standing in the sanctuary where it all began, Sarah realized that she had found her true calling, not just as a pilot, but as a warrior who understood that the most effective predators are those who see the entire hunting ground, protect their pack, and never stop learning from the natural world around them. The falcons wheeled overhead, their cries echoing across the valley, and Sarah knew that she would continue to learn from them for the rest of her career. Because in the end, the best warriors were those who understood that there was always more to see, more to learn, and more ways to protect the people who mattered most.